during COVID, I was living with my partner. My partner had two, teenage kids, so I was testing with them, and they actually were very instrumental in like making the game more fun.
Cool.
They would just give this like really practical feedback, like, why don't you just do this? This is so I can have more fun. And I'm like, okay, that's really obvious. I don't know. I didn't think of that.
Welcome to Cardboard Creations, where we discuss the process, techniques, and inspiration for designing board games. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I am super pumped to be here today with Travis Chance to find out how Clans of Midgard was created. But first, let's jump into a brief overview of how Clans of Midgard plays. Clans of Midgard is a draft, write, and fight game in which 2 to 4 players play as leaders of Viking clans seeking to gain glory. Each round you'll reveal a god and then draft rune cards with multiple effects to conquer territory, fight monsters, sail the seas in your Drakkar, collect powerful runes, and honor your warriors who have passed on to Valhalla. After 3 rounds of drafting and writing, the player with the most glory wins the game and will be forever remembered as a hero of the Viking Age. Hey Travis, welcome to the show.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well, thanks. I love your stone background there.
Things are going pretty good at Winterfell, so,
We're not talking about Game of Thrones today, but so I've actually never played Champions of Midgard. I owned it for years. I wanted to play it. I heard it was like great. And but I did obviously play Clans of Midgard, which is a new release that you co-designed, I believe. And it almost to me feels like a stripped down roll and write version of like something like Blood Rage. And I think for me, like or flip and write, roll and write, whatever, that's not my like number one genre, but I love that there are more games coming out that like now we're drafting cards to figure out, there's a little more complexity and meat on the bones along with that simple like roll and write mechanism. So I think it's really cool. But I gotta know, like, what initially inspired you and your co-designer Alara to create Clans? Yeah, what inspired you guys to create Clans of Midgard?
So I've worked with Alara over the years on a number of things. We've done a lot of like kind of back-end dev type stuff, and we've pitched tons of games together. I think we made a game that I believe 5 publishers signed and returned to us because it was like a Thunder Road type, Mad Max type game that people loved, but then didn't really know how to market. So we've got like a really interesting kind of collaborator history over the years. And what this kind of boiled down to, there was a few factors. Firstly, I should credit Scott Olms has this really great game called Boomerang, which I love. And this game borrows very heavily from the game Boomerang in terms of it being a drafting game where there's kind of like multi-use cards where there's a bunch of different elements on the cards and you can kind of pursue little mini games. So that was the starting point of that. And then also the other element of it was ding, 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 COVID. So I thought it would be really, a little backstory. I thought it would be really cool to quit my job as the head of Colossal Games like a month before the world shut down. And so I started a consulting company, and the consulting company was event-based. So that had to be on pause. So I was doing like dev and design work, and I talked to Shane from Gray Fox, and he had mentioned that they were looking for kind of little small add-on games to do on Kickstarters that were like, $15 to $20 add-ons. And so Alara and I got to talking, and we're like, Shane had mentioned that there was going to be a Reavers of Midgard, another Midgard game. We were like, let's make a game. Let's make a Baby Blood Rage is kind of what we called it. And that was really, so it was kind of the love of Boomerang and the desperation of COVID uh, combined for us to make this game. And it came together very quickly, largely in part to that, again, that very heavy inspiration from Boomerang. I do think this game is quite different than that game, and I would say it's a little heavier than that game, if you could call a Draft and Write heavier. But I had never seen a game like Boomerang before I saw Boomerang. I've seen a lot of these kind of, and I'm like you, I'm not like a big fan of the draft and flip and the kind of like little,
roll and write,
lighter games.
Lighter, yeah.
Yeah. They're fine. I also I think my OCD doesn't like taking things and like writing on them and then knowing I have to throw them away. And then at some point those will all be gone. That really bothers me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but the original thought was kind of like, how could we make a game that felt like it was an area control game that played in 20 minutes that kind of touched on all these little mini game ideas that felt thematically tied to kind of Vikings.
Sure.
And so, yeah. And then also that felt in character for the Midgard line, which the Midgard, Champions of Midgard, in my opinion, it's kind of like a gamer's version of, a more gamer's version of Lords of Waterdeep with some luck involved, more luck.
Gotcha. So after you guys had this idea, and I know, you've designed several games, but how did you get from that initial idea to creating a playable prototype?
How Alara and I typically work is we'll have a kind of a series of calls, and my tendency is to want to make things overcomplicated, and Alara's tendency is to rein me in. And one thing that I love about Alara is Alara will just shut me down, and I have a tendency to kind of bulldoze my other co-designers, but Alara does not allow it to happen. So we kind of talked through things like, oh, hey, there's the runic alphabet, so we're going to work on the runic alphabet. And then something I really like is I like the variability and asymmetry type elements. So we added these ideas of the gods and goddesses, which allow for different scoring opportunities and kind of abilities. And so it really did come together pretty much on the first pass, with the exception of the Valkyries. That was not in the original pass of the game. There was no dice. There was no Valkyrie element of the game. And it was more just how can we draft, in several rounds and try to ding, ding, ding on all these little reward, little mini game rewards as we can. And we put it together really easily because the game effectively was just 28 cards, a little map, and some cubes,
Sure.
And something in the little pad to write on.
It's really cool because from those multi-use cards, there are so many thinky decisions. You're competing for to have the highest offering for the gods, the battling, all these different tracks, but it comes together really, really nicely. As far as prototyping and testing this out, how did you two make the actual prototype that you use? And I guess if it was during COVID, was this something on TTS?
Yeah. Alara, during this time, I believe Alara was living somewhere very remotely in Canada, Yellowknife or something, maybe, or maybe they had just finished up in Yellowknife. But we had to create remotely prototypes. And at that time, during COVID, I was living with my partner. My partner had two, teenage kids, so I was testing with them, and they actually were very instrumental in making the game more fun.
Cool.
They would just give this really practical feedback, why don't you just do this? This is so I can have more fun. And I'm like, okay, that's really obvious. I don't know. I didn't think of that. So they were, Alyssa and Brooke, other names, they were instrumental in the playtesting, and they're credited as playtesters. They were really good at that. And then I also took the game, there were still things going on in the world, obviously. So I took the game and I played it with other game designers, like my friend Chris Ham, and some other people. And it was pretty uniformly thought to be clever. But to your point, it is a game that in your opening hand, you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And it was strangely, the game gets easier as it goes instead of harder as you go, because it's kind of semi-reductive. You start to kind of narrow it down. But yeah, that initial opening hand of that many cards is quite a lot. But when you learn the language of the game, then I think it gets a little easier. And it's so short that, like, you can lose and take your lumps and then try again.
Did you design those sheets, like, or like how did that evolve, and how did you actually create those like sheets?
We just made like a crappy map, and then we made the little sheets, and Laura gets all the credit for that, because at that time I had not done any kind of graphic design type stuff for design in a while, because I'd been a studio head, so I was afforded the luxury of asking other people to do that for me. So
Sure.
but yeah, like we just kind of made I don't know if I know what program Alara used, but we just put it together, and it just had all the components, and then it was just a matter of like tweaking and moving values and things like that, and points. But again, like, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think the from start to finish it was like 27 or 28 days till we submitted the game.
Wow.
Yeah, for development.
That's impressive. What was the rest of your playtesting process like? And, how do you keep track of feedback and whatnot when it comes to playtesting?
So I think I might have quite different opinions on playtesting than maybe some other designers. And again, I think this has been a result of, not to sound snooty, you missed me. I pushed my nose up. It was a big comedy moment for me. So I do a lot of internal playtesting, and like I have people that I trust, and so like I tend to do a lot of internal testing with peers instead of playing with the public. When I do get to that point where I start to play with the public, a lot of the times, what I find to be valuable is to just listen to what people are saying, and then you have to kind of filter that through your lens. Like, okay, well, I don't like the fighting because, well, they might think they don't like the fighting because of that, but it might actually be a problem somewhere else in the game. So it's a matter of like allowing people to have their feedback, and then trying to interpret how that's actionable, instead of just like letting people tell you, what you're supposed to do. So, I mean, almost all of the playtesting was done with the teenage, my partner's daughters, and her. So we played the game numerous times. I played it kind of blindly by myself, and once you've made a bunch of games, you kind of get a sense of like, you have a sense of what is going to happen. But again, like when I showed it to the girls had like very practical observations that were kind of missed, and those were applied. And then once we handed off to Dev, they started to play it without us at all. And then they came back to us. They're like, hey, this doesn't have that connective tissue to Champions of Midgard in terms of there being die rolling. So the Valkyrie added in.
Cool. And I guess like, yeah, this is crazy how fast it came together. But what would you say was like the biggest challenge you all faced, designing and or developing Clans of Midgard?
The biggest challenge in any project in which I'm involved is usually me. dealing with my ADHD meta language that I, as I flail and try to change topics. No, I mean, I think honestly it was COVID. It was the pressure cooker of COVID. This is a game where you want to have as many people as possible playing, because like many kind of area, it's more of an area majority than area control. You really need that player interaction. So I played a lot of games of it with 3, and I believe Alara's ability to play it was limited. I don't think we played it, we didn't play it all over TTS or anything like that. I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it was just limitations of COVID, really. And then, I mean, we submitted it, and then it was years before it actually came out. It only just came out at this last Gen Con, and I didn't even know it was coming out at Gen Con. So it was one of those things where it got done, and it kind of like sat there for a while, and then, it just happened.
Sure. Along with that, aside from you possibly being the biggest challenge and just like, working with other people, did you have any aha moments, as in those first 30 days that you were working on this? You or Alara?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of like, kind of like a poo-poo platter type game where like you can pick and choose and you're being pulled in all those different directions. The thing that we realized was that like you could take that kind of structure, that foundation, and that could be applied to like lots of different themes, lots of different ways that you could do these mini games. And we started talking about doing other ones. And interestingly, we actually just have an agreement to start doing a line of these types of games that are just going to be a little add-on games on some upcoming Kickstarters, which is going to be pretty cool. Yeah.
I love the look and feel of this game too. I think I have the probably the deluxe version with the meeples and everything,
The little
and
with the screen printed or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
and the
that's really
cloth
cool.
mat. Yeah, but the art and graphic design are really, really cool. And I think, having all those mini games, you do need to have good iconography that's nice and clear. So, how were the art and graphic design decisions made?
I gotta be honest with you, we were not a part of that whatsoever. Okay. This was an interesting project because we kind of signed over the game, and it was, I think Shane was willing to just take a risk on it, so we just kind of signed a flat deal and then handed it off and waited. So I think Clans and Reavers both have really attractive artwork and nice graphic design. So knowing that it was going to be a part of that, I had no doubts in my mind that would be wouldn't be an issue. My current job is a creative director at a studio, so like I tend to be involved in those things, but I was very happy with the end results. But yeah, we chose the gods, we chose the monsters. Everything else is pretty like agnostic. Like there's no, other than it's like Viking-ish, like the little map you fight on. Where the hell is that supposed to be? It's somewhere. It's a place.
Abstract.
You're fighting for places. Yeah. The red place, the green place.
Yeah, it gives it like a bit of simplicity. That's like, even though, again, you have these like thinky decisions with the card drafting. And I actually love that you called out that it like you narrow in on your strategy as you play, because it's like if you're starting to like lean in one way, then it's like the drafting probably gets easier, as you play, if you like want to keep leaning in that direction. But it's cool that there are lots of different ways to score and play this, and that totally makes sense that considering this is in the family of like Champions of Midgard, Reavers of Midgard, that it'll have that same artistic flavor and everything.
Yeah, and to your point about it being narrowed, like the thing that's nice in the game is even if in the first round you don't necessarily know what you're doing, you'll incidentally pick up points. You're like, oh, cool, I got this matching pair of monsters. Oh, okay. And then that kind of educates you or like, oh, I marked off these letters. Their alphabet in the end game ended up being different. I think they used like a English alphabet when we had like a runic, Futhark, I think it was called, alphabet. I think they just did that so that it was easier. So you were like looking at actual recognizable letters instead of like, here's, fish symbol to the left. Here's fish symbol to the right. It was really cool to work on. I was really happy with the end product, and we're currently working on another one of these kinds of games.
Cool.
It's got like a tile laying, engine building element to it too.
Ooh, slick. Nice. So were you involved with coming up with the name Clans of Midgard? And or do you know like how that name got established?
I think the name we suggested was Gods of Midgard.
Okay.
Because the god element is the kind of variable element from game to game. I guess that probably doesn't make sense because not all of the gods are. Midgard is Earth, and
right.
So none of them are from Midgard. But I guess calling it like gods of Alfheim, Muspelheim, Helheim / and then like every place they could be from, Vanaheim was probably too much. They chose that. That was all. We had no involvement in that. This doesn't make for great storytelling, right? You're asking these questions. Nothing. We did nothing.
But hey, every game has its own story, and like they're all different. So like it's great. It's great to like hear that a game came together like this, and that sometimes it works like this, where it's like you get a project and you hand it off, and then you wait and discover it's at Gen Con one year.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't had anything come out for a while, so it was nice because I was working over at CMON and everything's tied up in intellectual property, you know,
Yeah.
like the bank heist lasers or the bank vault lasers where they're trying to like dodge through those so that the game can eventually come out.
Yeah, yeah. Now that and I don't know if you've had experience in the past with this, but do you have any advice for someone who might be interested in kind of designing a game that feels like a streamlined reimplementation of an existing bigger game? You know, you said this is like baby Blood Rage, which
Right.
I feel that. So do you have any advice for someone who might be trying to like make a baby game, like a baby TI4 or something?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Like you could look at a game like another game from Gray Fox, like Last Light, right? So like Last Light was like the Space 4X game that you could play in an hour or whatever. I played it like when the designer was still kind of before it had launched, but it was impressive. No one I'd not seen that. I didn't know that was possible. So, I mean, you could start with that. You could start with the seemingly impossible task of how do I take something grandiose and distill it into something small that also feels true. So like another game that would be like that was, which I like 8 Minute Empire. Did you ever play 8 Minute Empire from Ryan?
No.
It was his first
I don't
game.
think so.
And I might be wrong here, and I adore Ryan, so if I'm misquoting him, I feel like he said he made that in like a week or something, like that game.
Wow.
But it's super simple. And that game feels like an extremely abbreviated version of like an area control game with like a really interesting little like kind of like card acquisition element to it. And it works. So I guess you could say, you know, hey, how do I turn, you know, Mega Civ into a 30-minute game, right? And often the answer is how do I look at smaller games and use those mechanisms, and which of those mechanisms would allow for the kind of placement of that theme or that the design task of making something that should be really big, really small. I mean, there is something kind of strange about that too, though, right? Like if someone said to you like, hey, like I really love the Lord of the Rings, but I wish all 3 movies were only 20 minutes total. Like part of what makes it amazing is that it's big and grandiose.
Right.
You might be asking a question, or as we say, you might be Jurassic Parking it. Like you're so busy trying to make something, you're not actually asking if anyone wants it. Like,
right.
But I mean, that would be my advice, I guess. My advice would be to try to look at game systems that are small that you could kind of beef up a little bit and make it feel as though it's, you know, a bigger game.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Travis, it's been great talking to you as always. And it was really cool to hear kind of like the backstory for Clans of Midgard. Now, I know you said you guys might be working on more stuff in this direction, but is there anything else you're working on for Clans of Midgard, or anything you want to bring up that you're working on?
I'm not working on anything else for Clans of Midgard. I think when we first talked, you talked about Dark Providence, and like that. We finally got some news on that. That one will be coming out soon. That's when I'm the re-implementation of Study in Emerald, and that'll be the first game of a few from CMON that I worked on that are finally going to see the light of day. I'm over at Indie Boards and Cards right now, and I mean, I can't tell you the name of this game, but I am working on a sandbox game right now that is every player has their own entire sandbox game, and you sit down with your whole game, and everyone has their own game, and then all the games link together to make like
that sounds neat.
yeah. That should be like going up on Kickstarter in the fall.
Okay. All right. Cool.
That's the kind of stuff I really want to make, because I just want to make these big, gaudy, expensive sandbox games forever. And Forsaken. We have Forsaken is finally, speaking of sandbox games, that one hit a little bit of some complications, and that one's finally moving forward, and we're hoping to have that out later this year as well.
Awesome. Lots of good stuff. And I definitely am excited to hear more and try out Providence, because I played a Study in Emerald, and I love like deck building games too that have a board element to it.
I mean, and a lot of it is, I mean, all I did was Martin made an amazing game, and then I went in and made some new stuff and just tweaked it and tried to do the thing of find the not too crazy version versus the Gray Fox again did a second edition that was kind of streamlined.
Yeah.
But the fun part of that game is how absurd and obtuse it can be. And thematic. So yeah, and we set it in, like Prohibition era Americana and tried to do some cool stuff with the theme and historical figures and inclusion things that, it was, and it's set in the Cthulhu verse, the Simon, Death May Die.
Yeah. Well, Travis, thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Great chatting with you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for tuning into Cardboard Creations. Hopefully it's been as inspiring and fascinating for you as it has been for me. And remember, the only way to get something done is to start doing it. Boom.